Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode of the What Worked For You show. I'm very excited about today's show because we're going to be talking about e-commerce, something we haven't talked about too much on this show yet. So I'm very excited to learn about this. Our guest today, he has made a killing in the world of Amazon, a function that we all know and love very well, our little boxes that we get almost daily, it seems. But he's done over 13 million in Amazon sales. If you think about it, that is a lot. There's a lot of people out there, so very successful. He's an author of a book about the pillars, 5 of them specifically on Amazon wholesaling. He loves to coach people. Over 1,100 people he's helped with their businesses, get them going, get them started, getting them profitable. He today also runs a company called Brand Rocket, where branding, we got questions about this. We're going to talk about it in a very noisy world, a very important subject. He helps people in the world of e-commerce. He gets results. He gets results for his clients. And I'm looking forward to this chat. Corey Ganim, pleasure to have you today. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. How are you?
I'm doing well, Frank. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thanks so much for having me on, and I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Well, let's start with the 13 million online. We've been hearing for several years now, yeah, make money online, but you haven't just made money online, you've killed it in a world where a lot of people struggle to get momentum. When you step back and look at that impact, what does a number like that represent to you today?
Yeah, so I would say it represents just a lot of hard work and a lot of just figuring things out because I started on Amazon back in 2017, which is shortly after I graduated from college. And it really took me trying a few different business models of selling online to really find one that clicked. And the one that finally clicked was selling wholesale on Amazon, which I'm sure we'll dive into more here shortly, but it essentially involves buying products directly from the manufacturer or from authorized distributors in bulk and then turning around and selling them on Amazon for a profit. So before I landed on that model, I tried a few different other models. This is the one that really clicked for me, and I've been doing it ever since, really since, like I said, about 2017, and have met a lot of cool people and built a pretty cool business in the process.
So I just did some quick math because you said 8 years. That's not a very long time.
Right.
And so averaged out, that's 1.625 million per year. I mean, I know it's not literal average, but when you think about that, averaged out, most people would kill for that.
Yeah, well, the thing about selling on Amazon and e-commerce really in general is that that's a revenue number. Obviously, that's not a profit number. So in my world, the margins are actually pretty slim. So even though that averages out to be, 1.6 million or so per year, in my business model, and this is something that a lot of people probably won't tell you, but you're looking at net margins, and this is obviously after my salary's paid, but before you pay taxes, you're looking at net margins of 5 to maybe 8% on the high end if you're pretty good. So again, a lot of people get spellbound with that revenue number, but then they hear about the actual margins and they're like, wait, you're actually not making nearly as much money as people think, which is fine. It's just the kind of the playground that we play in.
Well, that's a beautiful distinction because that's one of the main things we hear in business. People advertise the gross, but then when you get down to the net, and that's a function of really any business getting down to,
Right.
okay, what's really going on.
Yep.
And all this success you've been able to create and just moving that much product, you ended up writing a book, The 5 Pillars of Amazon Wholesale. What would you say is the one pillar or one thing that people that get into this world of e-commerce underestimate?
So, and that's a really good question. I would say it is the second pillar, which is contacting suppliers. So what a lot of people get wrong when it comes to contacting suppliers or contacting brands to work with to try and sell their products is they'll contact them once, they'll make one call or they'll send one email, and then they never follow up. And I mean, Frank, I know you probably better than most people know the power of follow-up. You know, to be successful in sales, that it's more than a one-touch business. You've got to stay on top of people. You've got to stay on their radar. You've got to continue to add value over time. A lot of times just to get the opportunity to pitch them, right? Not even necessarily to get a foot in the door. So I think that's where most people fall short in this business. Really, the only reason people aren't successful in this business is because they lack follow-up and they lack consistency.
Yeah, well, I'm in real estate, and the entire business of real estate is in the follow-up.
Yep, exactly.
And I don't know that any business is that different, but we live in a very convenient world. And let's use Amazon as an example. I mean, you can buy anything
Yep.
practically, buy with one click half the things you want. No effort really needed, no thought if you don't want to put any in. And I think a lot of people translate that level of thinking to generating business, which of course that's not the case. How do you help people you've worked with understand, yeah, Amazon's super convenient, but building a business, it's not buy with one click?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So that's something that I think I've done a pretty good job of over the years is just being super transparent about the challenges and what it takes to succeed on Amazon because there's a lot of people out there, especially in the education space, which I'm in as well, who will promote it as a get rich quick type business or you hear all these claims of make 10,000 a month within your first couple of months, but like you said, it's not as simple as like a one click order. So really what I've tried to do is just educate people to the sense that, hey, this business is hard. It is a business after all, right? Just like any business, there's going to be pros, there's going to be cons, there's going to be barriers to entry, there's going to be all these things. But really to be successful, like I said earlier, you've just got to be consistent. You've got to create a daily routine of things that move the needle, and you've just got to execute on those things every day. And a lot of times people, whether they're in my community or just friends of mine or people I've mentored, a lot of times it just takes me giving them some quick feedback or just helping them course correct, making sure they're focusing on the correct inputs. And a lot of times they hit it hard for 60, 90 days and they've got a really strong pipeline with which they can really start to build their business at that point.
Daily routine. I want to touch on that because you said that word
Yeah.
and you said it and then you immediately told us about results you've seen from that. But for entrepreneurs, a lot of people go into it and it's this idea of I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to wake up when I want, right? Like in the whole
Yeah.
thing. And then you realize, maybe it's not quite that easy. Like I think a lot of entrepreneurs have walked that. What was it like for you figuring out and then developing a routine that worked? Because it sounds so simple. And if you work
Right.
a 9 to 5 job, it kind of is.
Right.
But all of a sudden, when you're an entrepreneur, it's like you have all this quote unquote freedom, but whoa, now that accountability is all on you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, what really helped me, and I think that, so the example that I'm going to give applies specifically to my business being an Amazon seller, but the logic applies to any job or any profession that you're trying to succeed in. So for me, I tried to determine what is the one thing, the number one lever mover in my business. And what I determined is that the number one thing that moves the needle is sourcing products, buying, right? Literally just purchasing inventory that we're going to turn around and sell. So then now that I know what the one thing is, it's as simple really as reverse engineering. It's like, okay, well, what goes into me buying a product? What do I need to do to get to the point where I can buy a product? And to kind of walk that back a little bit, it's like, well, first, I've got to contact a supplier because I've got to ask them if I can open a wholesale account. Okay, what happens next? Well, then next, I've got to evaluate their products and see if they're profitable at a point where I can sell them on Amazon. And then what's the last step? The last step is simply placing the purchase order. So if you walk it all the way back to that first step of, well, I've got to contact suppliers, then that's my daily routine. That's my KPI. That's what I'm focused on every day is how many new suppliers did I find in a given day and how many new suppliers did I contact in a given day, right? And then you could add a third KPI for, well, how many suppliers that I contacted previously did I follow up with today? And really those three KPIs, if those are going up every day, your business is going to grow. And if you just hit those at a minimal level, 2, 3, 4 phone calls a day, but you do it every single day for 30, 60, 90 days, you're going to be successful. And I mean, Frank, again, you being in the real estate space, I know the same goes in your business because I'm sure you've seen people who come into the industry and they hit it really hard. They make 100 calls a day for the first week and then they burn out and then you never hear from them again. But then you see other people who set a more attainable goal of, well, hey, I'm going to make 30 calls a day, but I'm going to do it every day for 60 days. I'm sure, Frank, you've seen those are the people who probably are still around today in your industry.
No, absolutely. I almost giggle when I hear you describe that because when you hear about people that want to have success as investors, the number one question that people always ask is, well, how many offers did you make today?
Right. That's the main, I know in your business, that is the main, that's the one thing, right?
That is the one thing.
Exactly.
And almost 100% of the time, easily high 90s, that answer will be close to, if not zero.
Right. Yep.
And that's the whole game right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me ask you about this regarding Brand Rocket.
Yep.
One thing that struck me was you're helping tool and automotive brands have some success on Amazon. I'm a car guy, so of course the automotive's like, oh yeah, well, let's talk car stuff.
Yeah.
Right, even though it's not really cars, but what is it that made that niche interesting to you, both in terms of opportunity, growth, and like what drew you to that particular focus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a couple of factors really. One, so tools and automotive products, that's actually two separate categories on Amazon. I kind of lump them into the same bucket, if you will, because a lot of times the product, like the category doesn't matter, right? It's like a tool product could work for, in an automotive context. There could be plenty of automotive products that are tools. So I felt that those two categories or those two niches went hand in hand. So on the one hand, I like those categories because they have higher ticket products. Most of the tool products out there, not all of them, of course, but many of them are going to sell for 50, 100, 150, 200 plus dollars. So I like the higher ticket nature of those products. And the second factor is that a lot of tool and automotive brand owners, they're just not savvy when it comes to Amazon. A lot of these folks are older, they're in their 60s, they're in their 70s. They're a small mom and pop shop, but they've got these products that do really well on Amazon, but they don't know how to market those products, or they're not willing to learn how. So I've just found that the demographic of the brand owners mixed with the price point of those products, it just tends to be a more attractive niche for me to come in and add value and help some of these brands grow and just help, really just help market them better on Amazon.
So are a lot of these companies you're helping, they would be more of the mom and pop small business, or is there a mix of that and medium and large? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, so really my sweet spot is working with, like you said, more mom and pop type brands who maybe the owner is still the one fulfilling some of the orders, but he's got a product that's selling really well or he's growing really quickly and he just doesn't have the bandwidth to manage Amazon. Like I'd say that's my bread and butter. We're not so much working with the larger, certainly not the national and sometimes not even the regional brands that have, established distribution. Our sweet spot is helping the folks who are in the growth phase handle their Amazon presence so that they can go and focus on their direct to consumer channel or building out their brick and mortar retail channel or building out their distribution channel.
So this reminds me of a story. I remember going to a BMW shop because we had to get a part. I'm in Atlanta, and we went down to the other end of Atlanta. Like it was probably the farthest dealer from me in all of Atlanta. And they're like, well, you can order this online and come pick up the part. And we had this, there was a time thing. So we had to go down there. I remember getting there to pick up this part. And you're thinking BMW, premium brand,
Right.
Like fancy setup. No. You walk in, You walk into the parts department and they're like, "Oh yeah, let me get you with the internet guy."
Yeah.
This guy comes over, and I'm thinking, that's the internet guy? Like, that wasn't who I was expecting, which is fine. He just looked like anybody, it looked like a shop tech, which was fine.
Yeah.
I was thinking, the sales dressed up type, stereotype. Nope, not at all. Comes out, he's like, yeah, I just sit over here at this desk and we get these orders and I just do my thing. It turns out their internet brand was a dude sitting at a desk that you could see from the parts counter.
Right.
And this is like at BMW, like you're
Yeah.
thinking, worldwide name, world renowned. This is a big dealer in the Atlanta market. No, it's just a guy at a desk.
That's hilarious. But I feel like that's so common. I feel like that's the case with a lot of these. I mean, and that's BMW, right? But think about the brands that I'm working with. A lot of times, that guy, it's the same situation, but that guy is also the owner, right? Like you got the owner who's the internet guy, who's the fulfillment guy, who's the Amazon guy, and he's also the Shopify guy, but he needs someone to help him at least take the Amazon hat off of his plate, right?
Exactly. And so, but that was my point, is it's easy to fall into this stereotype that the big names have got like this operation going.
Right. Yep.
When in reality, I'm like, okay, that is not true.
Yeah.
It's one guy at a desk.
Right.
Oh, and if he's on lunch break, nothing's happening. They
Yeah.
told me that. I was like, oh, okay, got it.
That's crazy.
How do you help business owners blow through that stereotype? Because I've met those owners where we think, oh, but we don't have X, Y, Z, therefore we can't do this.
So in my mind, a lot of time, and this is how I had the confidence early on when I didn't have much experience to pitch some of these brands that, quite frankly, I had no business working with. Really, you just need to be one step ahead of them, right? Or at least you need to be one step ahead of their Amazon guy or their current employee who's handling that aspect of the business. And that's actually how I landed my very first brand deal. Is I was talking with the owner's number two, so she was essentially the COO, and this was a pretty decent sized tool brand in Chicago. They had 35 employees in their warehouse, and I didn't know much at the time because I was new, but I think what I did a good job of is just educating her on their deficiencies on Amazon and asking questions to say, well, hey, did you know that your listing is currently lacking XYZ? Oh no, we didn't realize that. Tell me more, right? And then just taking that kind of consultative selling approach to position yourself as the expert. And then once you feel like you've earned the right to ask for the meeting, say, well, okay, well, is that something you'd want my help with? And naturally they're going to say, well, what does that look like? Right? And then you kind of take it from there. So I think just helping to educate the company and then just being one or even a half step ahead of the person that's currently doing it for them is really all you need.
That's such a great point because it's easy to think they've got it together when in reality, every company out there needs help to some degree.
Exactly. Yep. And you don't need to necessarily be like the foremost genius expert in your field. Like you said, you just got to know a little more than your prospect. And as long as you can deliver, then you'll be good.
Love it. Love it. Speaking of brands, one thing we've seen oftentimes is dealing with unauthorized resellers, counterfeits, and maybe it's not even counterfeit or unauthorized. This is just, right, it's generic copycat type things. And that can create some challenges for the customers. How do you come in there and like help people get kind of a sense of control back over their products, protect their reputation so it's not getting mixed up with that other guy over there selling something? And because it's easy for us as consumers to be like, well, and the public's getting more educated, right, as more
Right.
information's coming online, but still there's a lot of this secondhand stuff that maybe doesn't quite fit the bill, but you get lumped in as a business owner.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably the single biggest pain point of the brands that I talk to is that they've got people selling their products online and they don't know who the heck they are. They don't know if the products are authentic. They might be counterfeit. They really just have no control over some of these businesses who are representing their products online. And so the first thing that we do is just help them get an inventory of who is selling their product, right? So that's a very common exercise that I will go through. And this is a lot of times before we even start working with a brand. This is just to prove our value up front, is to go above and beyond by doing something like sending them a spreadsheet of all of the people who are currently selling their products on Amazon and saying, hey, these are their storefront names. These are their company names. This is where they're located. Do you recognize these companies? And a lot of times they'll say, well, no, we don't know who any of those people are. So a lot of times what the most effective way to help a brand police their Amazon marketplace specifically is to help them enroll in what's called the transparency program, which is just a program that Amazon offers that essentially allows a brand to serialize every one of their units. So that way I could not sell that brand's products on Amazon unless I have that specific serial number. And the only way for me to get that serial number is to get it directly from the brand. So when brands enroll their products into transparency, they essentially lock down their listings. And from that point on, the only people who can sell their products are the ones who have those transparency codes from the brand. So that's a super simple fix when it comes to like, hey, you've got 30 people selling your product. You only want 2 of your best people to sell your product. Well, let's just enroll in transparency and get rid of those other 28 and then only give those transparency codes to the 2 people who you trust. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow. So it could live. So again, going back to the car, I'm selling maybe a car part. Let's say brakes, kind of an important thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
selling brake parts. I could literally have 25, 30 companies on Amazon supposedly selling this part that I make,
Mm-hmm.
and then saying that, oh, well, it's this part. And of course, and we wouldn't think nothing of it
Right.
until potentially something very bad could happen.
Exactly. And we see it all the time where a lot of times we will place test buys for some of these sellers who are in that example. If let's say it's a BMW brake and you've got 30 people selling that same part on Amazon, well, a lot of times we would advise a BMW to go in and purchase some of those units from some of those sellers. And they're shocked to find that, hey, we placed 10 test orders from 10 different sellers and 7 of them were fake, right? We've got to get these guys out of here. These are going to hurt somebody. So a lot of times brands either don't realize that's going on or they don't acknowledge it or they kind of put their head in the sand and just hope that they don't get served with a lawsuit, which I hate to say it, but it really depends on the types of product you sell, but it's going to happen eventually, right? Especially if you don't take any action to fix it.
Yeah, no, and if you've been in business, the counterfeit thing is a real thing out there with products, and that's yeah. We always
Yeah.
want to buy. I mean, it's one thing when people choose a generic, right? Okay, well, let's get this. It's kind of light, it's a little cheaper, but that's different from person B is saying they're selling person A stuff, but they're really not.
Right.
It's 2 different things. That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about all the people you've coached, as you've helped a lot of people with their businesses at this point. What would you say is the most rewarding thing you've gotten out of that process, helping people with this idea of e-commerce, especially because there's such high turnover of
Yeah.
people that try it?
There is really high turnover, and that is definitely one of the more unfortunate parts of the business is you'll get some really sharp people who want to learn, but they're simply not consistent enough or they don't stick with it enough long enough to be successful. Now, where I get the most fulfillment is getting the guy in the community or into the coaching who he's hungry, he wants to learn, maybe he has a little bit of sales experience already. Those tend to be the best people to coach. And it's like you give them a little bit of direction and you help them course correct along the way and you give them some structure on what to do every day and then they just go and crush it. And then within a couple of weeks they're coming back to you and they're saying, "Hey, I just, landed an account with this brand," or "Hey, we just locked down this product." And they've just got wins are just flowing in because they're doing the right things. And a lot of times they're just taking massive imperfect action, right? So I'd say one of the most fulfilling things is again, setting the person on the path, kind of giving them those guardrails to stay within, and then just watching them be tenacious in the execution. That to me is makes me really proud of that person, because when I started, that was the approach that I took, but I didn't have the coaching or the guidance because the industry was a little newer back when I started 8 years ago. So seeing that person being like, hey, that was kind of me 8 years ago, and now I'm giving this kid the guidance that I wish I had. A lot of times, that's the most fulfilling. And I say kid because I feel like this industry it's a lot of younger people, right? I'd say people in their early 20s to late 20s is the main demographic. However, we've got people of all walks of life that are crushing it. We had one person in our community who was late 70s. She was a retired grandmother. We have one guy who just sold his IT company for 8 figures, who just wanted the new path. And both of those people are doing great. So it really just depends on, your temperament and your goals.
That's cool. And it's cool to hear the age range. And it's interesting you mentioned the more senior citizens, because, the world's transformer is a lot of more elderly people that are more active.
Yeah.
Like this idea of I'm just going to go retire and hang out at home, like you're seeing less and less of that.
Right.
People want to be alive. They're like, no, I want to actually keep living.
Yeah,
So,
as they should. I mean, I feel like, especially for older folks, having some sort of side hustle or something to keep them busy and keep some income coming in is good. It just, like you said, it keeps them active in those older years and gives them something to get out of bed for every day.
keeps the brain sharp.
Right. Exactly.
Sharp. I know when I visit my parents, they'll have like the TV and the news. I'm like, can you please turn off the news while your son's here?
Yeah. Oh, I'm the same way. I
Like
hate the
nothing
news.
good is coming from that, mom and dad. Let's go. Come on now.
Right.
Let's talking about mom and dad. Let's step back to your teenage years, specifically your teenage years, because as I was learning, that is when you got into this idea of entrepreneurship. So, like, what was that like as a teenager saying, you know what, let's go start a business, and what mom and dad have to say about all this?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I would say it was two main business ventures in my, I'd say, teens to early 20s that were the catalyst of eventually stepping into the e-commerce world. So the first main business venture that I did, I mean, I probably did this for about 10 years, but you're going to think it's funny because it's one of those boring businesses that nobody thinks about, but it was converting people's old VHS tape home movies to DVDs and digital formats. So, I mean, I'm sure, Frank, I'm sure you guys have plenty of them, but you'd be shocked to find out how many people with kids who are my age, who grew up in the late 80s or the 90s, and all their home, or really all their childhood memories are on VHS, or they're on 8 millimeter tapes because they were recorded on these big old camcorders that our parents used to, lug around on Christmas and record the presents opening and all that stuff. So people have all these tapes lying around, and I offered a simple service to go and convert those tapes to DVDs or digital. And it was an easy sell because people had them, and you were able to kind of position fear in the sense that, well, hey, if you don't get these tapes converted, they are going to, like, they're gonna degrade, right? And that does happen. If you let those tapes lie around for a while, the quality goes to nothing. So I was able to build a pretty decent just side hustle out of that. I started that in ninth grade by sending a mass email to all of my mom's Outlook contacts saying, hey, I'm Corey, I'm Carrie's son. I'm converting old tapes for $10 a piece. If you're interested, send me an email. And that's how I got my first client. I did that for about 10 years, and it was all from referrals. So it was 100% referral based, which was really cool. And then the second main business was when I started after my freshman year of college, where I had some time during the summer. I was working just a day job that was only like half the day. So I had the other half of the day to find something else to do to make money. And I started just pressure washing people's driveways. So what I did is I just went door to door, every house in my neighborhood. And I said, hey, my name's Corey. I'm trying to pay my way through college. Do you mind if I give you a quote to pressure wash your driveway and your sidewalk? And how I would price it is I would say, well, hey, it's $300 for the driveway, it's $50 for the sidewalk, or I'll do both for just the price of the driveway. I'll do both for $300. And, one in probably 20, 25 people that you knock on their door take you up on it. and it ends up being really good, like dollars per hour for a college kid. So I did that pretty much every summer of college. And so I'd say those two businesses were the main ones that really taught me sales and follow up and asking for referrals and all the kind of the soft skills in business.
Love it, love it. As I was thinking about you talking about VHS, I'm like, if you go try to buy a VCR today,
They're expensive. Well, and
they're
so
very expensive.
it's funny that you mentioned that because that actually was almost the second iteration of that VHS to DVD conversion business. So, like I said, for 8 to 10 years, I was doing that. I was converting people's VHS tapes to DVDs. But what I realized, Frank, is that so many of these people still had their VHS players or they still have their camcorders, right? But obviously, they're never going to use them because that technology is outdated by 20 years. But like you said, that stuff's expensive. I mean, some of those camcorders go for 150, 200, $300 on eBay. Same with the VCRs that play the VHS tapes. So what I started doing towards the end of that side hustle is when I would quote people, I'd say, well, hey, you've got 10 tapes. Okay, great. That's going to be $250. But if you've got a camcorder, right? If you've got some of your old stuff that you want to get rid of, I will buy it back from you. And instead of paying you cash, I will just credit your invoice for the conversions, right? So a lot of times I would buy back these VCRs or these camcorders from people for, $20, $30 and then turn around and sell them on eBay for literally 10 times what I paid for them. And I didn't actually have to pay for them because I just credited it towards the service, right? So that ended up actually being more lucrative long term than the actual main job, which was pretty cool to kind of discover organically.
And so to our listeners who are looking for a side hustle, you don't need you could recycle that idea today.
I tell people all the people ask me, how do I get started? I'm like, please just go do that. Like just talk to somebody in your community, pitch them on converting their old VHS tapes. I mean, it's one of the easiest businesses ever. Your margins are 99%. There's like one piece of equipment you buy on Amazon for, $50, and that's pretty much all you need. So I should drop a course on that business.
I was gonna say. Now I do gotta ask, did someone's VCR tape ever break?
Yeah, so that did happen. That happened like once and it wasn't a and this was my fault too. So it never happened with like a VHS tape or like an 8mm tape. But there was a lady that she had a bunch of these old reels, like film reels, where she said, hey, can you convert film reels? So I was like, well, I haven't before, but I'll try. So I took a bunch of film reels from her and I bought a device that supposedly could do that. And when I hooked it up to the device, it like crinkled the film a little bit and then like ripped part of it. And I was like, oh man, like I don't want to be responsible for messing up this lady's film. So I just gave them back to her. I said, ma'am, I apologize. Like I can't do this. And I did damage this one here. And she, it wasn't a big deal because they weren't like family memories. I think they were just old videos that she wanted done. But that was really the only time that I can think of where there was some damage. But yeah, I tried to be super, super careful because I mean, I had one customer that comes to mind where she's like, these are the only memories I have of my husband. He passed away. Like, please don't lose these or hurt these. And so I took that very seriously.
Wow. Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Yeah, because I remember some of the old VCR tapes, they could get a little crinkly at
They'd be
times.
finicky, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's awesome. I love it. What a great way to start in the world of business too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Tap into and we all know, I mean, I got 2 large cases still of cassette tapes.
Yep.
And I'm like, I should buy the CDs. Oh wait, I can't just like reuse it. I have to go buy it again. Well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So you also, before you went full-time entrepreneur, I noticed that you did some work with IBM.
Yep.
And so you're playing around with the entrepreneur thing, and then you like got into the world of IBM, and then I saw it looked like you did a couple of different things with them. Like, how did that tie into this journey? Because it seems like such a detour.
Yeah, so I actually was working for IBM before I started selling on Amazon. So it was summer between my junior and senior year of college. I got an internship working for IBM in a sales role, and enjoyed the internship, did well there. They offered me a full-time job to come back after graduation. So that was really my first, let's say, quote unquote, real job out of college, was working for IBM in a sales role. And that job allowed me to move across the country. So I was born and raised in North Carolina, went to college in North Carolina. The job working for IBM was based out of Chicago. So they moved me all the way to Chicago and really put me through a year and a half of very intense sales training, which I'm incredibly grateful for to this day. IBM has one of the best, I would say, new salesperson training programs in corporate. I mean, I think they're pretty highly regarded among a lot of the big tech companies as having some of the better sales training. So pretty much at least once or twice a month for about a year and a half, we would fly to a different IBM location. Sometimes it was New York, sometimes it was Illinois, other places, and do in-person role play, like sales role plays with retired IBM executives for a whole week, once a month. So it's like you spend 3 weeks kind of preparing for these case studies, then you show up and you do this in-person role playing. And I mean, they kind of throw you into the fire, right? You can imagine how intimidating it was to go and try to sell, right, in a training context, these retired sales executives who had been doing it for like 40 years. So that was some of the better training that I got. And then it was around that time that I started selling on Amazon on the side. And then about 2 years into my career at IBM, that's when I quit IBM and started selling online full time.
So you got the sales training and said, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, yeah. But it ended up being it ended up being perfect because, again, with my Amazon business, a lot of what I do is sales, right? We're calling these brands, we're calling these distributors, we're pitching them on why they should work with us. We're selling all day. So it's almost like I was getting paid to have one of the best sales educations you could possibly have. And then I got to turn around and apply that in my own business, which was really cool.
No, that is. And so as an e-commerce seller, would you say sales is the number one skill to have when you're going into something like this?
So I'd say for my business model, yes. For my business model, yes. Now, if you were doing something like a private label where you're starting your own brand from scratch and you're then having to market that brand, I'd say for that business model, probably more of like a marketing and design mind is a higher leverage skill. But again, for my business model where we are pitching brands and distributors on allowing us to sell their products, sales by far is the most critical skill to have.
Love it, love it, love it. Speaking of selling, you've been selling a book
Yeah.
and, taking the time, and obviously today it's a little squirrely, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, just use AI to write your book, right? Like that's a thing now.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe for a quick ebook, I see it being helpful, but the reason people write books is you're giving back, right? You're serving, you're helping people, and you're passing on what you've learned. What was one of the most surprising things you learned as you went through that process that you didn't expect?
So I would say probably the most surprising part of it was just what I feel was the mastery that came with writing the book, because again, this business is something that I've been doing for the last 8 years. And then about 2.5 years ago, I started creating content on it. And then about 2 years ago, I started coaching on it. So those things all kind of led to me further mastering the material and mastering the business model. But it really wasn't until I put pen to paper and had to explain all of the concepts in detail, broken down in order, in sequence, to where somebody could pick up the book that had never heard of Amazon before and read it and grasp the concepts. I think that exercise really forced me to master the parts of the process, especially the parts that I wasn't yet a master at, right? Because I feel like I'm really good at the sales and marketing aspects of the business, but then on the shipping and logistics side, that's something that I was good at, but in order to write that book, I had to get really good at it, right? So I think it was just a forcing function for you to become that much better at your craft when you put it on paper and you make a book out of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, as the saying goes, the best way to know if you know something Teach
To
it to
teach
someone.
it. Yep.
If you can do it, you're golden. If you can't, maybe reconsider that or brush up a little bit. Sure.
Right.
Speaking of brushing up, as an entrepreneur, we all have tough moments. Some of these moments are insanely tough. Like we just can't even imagine how difficult some things get. And anytime we think that's the hardest thing I ever did, sure enough, that's just a prep for the next one,
Yeah. Right.
like clockwork. What's the biggest mistake you've made so far that has allowed you to be propelled forward the most?
Ooh, I have about 100 that come to mind, but I would say one big mistake that came to mind, and this was in the coaching and community business, not necessarily the actual selling on Amazon, but more on the information product side, is not budgeting for lean months. So when I started the coaching business, it started off really hot. I mean, we came out of the gate doing well. We're signing up a lot of clients. We're making a lot of money. And I made the mistake of just hiring much too quickly, right? We were having some really good months. Each month was better than the last. And I mistakenly had the mindset of, well, it's always going to be this way, right? Why would we have down months, right? When in hindsight, it's kind of ridiculous to say. And so I hired a big team too quickly. And to be honest, at the time, there was almost an Amazon bubble where you had all these people learning about it to get into the space because, quite frankly, it was easy at the time. This is about a year and a half ago. And then it's like the bubble burst. Amazon started getting much stricter on who they allowed to sell on their platform. They got much stricter on the things that you could and couldn't sell. And then it's like all of a sudden overnight, the interest in selling on Amazon was significantly lower. So we might have had, 10, 15 leads per day coming into our funnel for our coaching business. We then had one or two, right? Or three or four. So it caused me to have to just lay off some of the folks on the team. We got to the point where it's like we're not making enough money to sustain the team that I thought we were going to need. And so we had to end up leaning out a lot quicker. So I think the biggest takeaway for me is scaling slowly a lot of times is better than just scaling quickly by any means necessary and just keeping things lean, right? I'll be the first to admit I spent too much money too quickly. We were spending money on things that in hindsight were more of a nice to have than a need to have. And just keeping that mindset of, let's keep as much cash on hand, save for a rainy day so that we don't get into a position like that ever again.
Scaling too fast. I can relate to that.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I bet a lot of your listeners can too. So hopefully they, have
Yes.
some takeaways from that.
But that's so true. It's so easy to think, well, this is how it'll always be, but that's not reality. Markets
Right.
do shift, things do shift. It was interesting though, you mentioned that was a year and a half ago. So Amazon changes some things, some rules of the game shift. Why did that shift make online selling less desirable versus people just saying, okay, the rules change, we'll make an adjustment?
Yeah, and that's a good question because really up until that point, Amazon didn't have very strict guidelines on documentation and basically proving that what you're selling was legitimate. So what eventually happened about a year and a half ago, and it's funny because I use Nike socks as the example because it's the most notorious example in our space of this kind of thing happening. So what was happening is that people were just making Amazon seller accounts. They were buying fake Nike socks off Alibaba and they were just selling them on Amazon and making 10, 15, $20,000 a month in profit. And Amazon wasn't really doing much to verify that, hey, these Nike socks are legitimate or not. They were just letting anybody sell. And so it was almost like out of the blue, it's like one day that was happening. And then the next day, Amazon just laid the hammer down and they made it to where, all right, you're basically guilty until proven innocent if we think that you're selling something that's counterfeit. So they just made the requirements of, if you want to sell a product or if you want to prove that a product's legitimate, you've got to have the full supply chain, of invoices and documentation and letters of authorization directly from the manufacturer. Bottom line, they just created significantly more hoops to jump through to do business on their platform. And it was almost like overnight. So it went from like wild, wild west. You've got guys that are like 18 years old making 10 grand a month selling these fake Nike socks, which by the way, I would never advocate, but people were doing it. To the next week, it's like, well, hey, now it's actually a real business and you've got to treat it like one. And so it just weeded out a ton of people who were just not serious about the business, which is a good thing for some, but for others, it just made it harder.
Wow. 90 socks of all things, right?
Yeah, it's like the notorious example that anybody in our space, if you bring up Nike socks, they probably have a story about, selling them authentically, but like seeing 150 different sellers on a listing for Nike socks, and like half of them are fake, right? And from Amazon's eyes, it was a legitimate concern from the FTC. They're like, we've got to get this fixed or we are going to get sued by a lot of people. And that's what was happening.
So it kind of reminds me, like, I think shoes are always very interesting. You'll see like a website like Goat, for example, where it's like, okay, they're only going to sell you the legit shoe if you buy it from them, or a StockX or one of those. But then if you go to eBay and say, well, I want to buy, to use your example, Nike, like Air Jordans, right? Expensive shoes, nice shoes, etc. And they'll have this thing called the authenticity guarantee.
Yeah.
And with a website like Go, like it's just automatic. At least it was when I've used it in the past. I don't know if it still is. But with eBay, it's like, well, you could buy this pair that doesn't have it, or you could buy this pair that does. And now you're sitting there going, well, that one that doesn't looks a lot cheaper, but man, you're studying the pictures and you're like, man, it's got to be real, right? You try to convince yourself it's real. How effective have you found those things, those authenticity type services? Is that something you come across, or?
Yeah, so on Amazon, that's not really a thing, only because when you're selling on an Amazon listing, all of the offers and all of the sellers selling that product are grouped under the same listing, right? So if I want to go buy, let's say, a large white pair of Nike socks, if there's 100 people selling those socks, they're all just different sellers, but they're on the same listing, right? So it's kind of a gamble as to which seller I'm actually going to end up buying from, depending on whoever's in the buy box, right? Now, where that does come into play, kind of like I mentioned earlier in our conversation, where brands that do tend to struggle with counterfeits more than others will a lot of times enroll their products in that program that I mentioned, the transparency program, which then allows them to serialize every product that they sell on Amazon. So that way a customer actually, when they get that product in the mail, there's a transparency, like a QR code on the product where the customer can scan that QR code and it'll show them, hey, this product originated here. It basically shows them the full, that's why it's called transparency. It just gives them transparency into the manufacturing process and where that product actually came from. So that's just one of the mechanisms that brands have for kind of authenticating in the way that eBay does or Goat does or StockX does.
So it's not just a statement or a guarantee, it's we're going to actually show you step 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
4.
it's a physical barcode or a physical QR code that customers can scan when they get it if they want.
So if somebody's really hardcore, they could literally go and validate what's going on at each step of the process.
Yep, exactly.
That's pretty cool. That's cool. Well, you've proven how to build authority on Amazon, but what does success look like to you now beyond just sales and numbers?
So for me, I think it's just diversifying and having not necessarily multiple streams of income, although that is the goal. Just not all my, I don't want to have my whole net worth tied up in Amazon, for lack of a better phrase, right? So a lot of times we'll hear horror stories of people who sell on Amazon. They've got all this capital and all this money invested into their business, but then Amazon suspends them or they get shut down for whatever reason. So success to me in 2025 and beyond is, yes, having a successful Amazon business, but also having other investments, right? Whether it's real estate or stocks or dividend funds or all these other vehicles that you can invest in, that is what I'm more focused on these days is just diversifying my assets and diversifying my investments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because you never know when things are kind of piggybacking off earlier, things that go up and down.
Right.
Speaking of up and down, when up and downs happen, fear gets introduced to the marketplace, right? Doubt tends to creep into our minds. How do you push through fear and doubt? And the second part of it is, how do you help other people that are new push through that being such a pervasive thing we have to deal with as humans?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. It's like, I mean, there's been plenty of times, even in this business, where when I was starting out, I was doubtful as to whether or not the business could work. I was fearful on whether I could make something of it or not. But I just kept going back to those KPIs. It's like, well, what are the things that I need to do every day that if I do them over a long enough period of time, they virtually guarantee success? And so as long as I'm hitting those daily inputs, then I know that I realistically don't have much to worry about, right? I just have to let time do its thing. And that's the same advice that I give to newer people in the space. It's like, listen, if you're doing the right thing, right? First, we help them identify what are the right things for them to do, and then we put a plan together. And if they're doing those things, then they're good to go, right? They don't necessarily have to worry. It's just like stay the course, have faith, keep executing day in and day out, and you'll get there.
So when you're executing day in and day out, you mentioned, if I'm doing the right things, consistent, I'm disciplined, I'm making it happen, the success is, it's gonna happen one way or another.
Yep.
The question then becomes how long?
Yep.
Because a lot of people will come in. It's interesting, it used to be when online things would come out, it was like, oh, everyone was thinking get rich quick kind of thing, right? And that's how a lot of things were sold.
Yep.
Fast forward, and then people are saying, well, it's not get rich get quick. So now a lot of people are saying it's not that. But the reality is, no matter how many times people say that, when people get into online opportunities, somehow that thought never seems to go away.
Yep.
So it raises then the question of, okay, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E every day faithfully, but how do you help people understand this is not only going to take time, but it's probably going to take longer than you think.
Right.
It may not. You might, the stars might align and it might happen quicker than expected, but usually ends up taking longer. How do you help people understand that and beyond, like what is like if someone wanted to start today, what is a reasonable time to where you would say, okay, this business is just, it's moving now, it's doing well?
And I'm glad you asked that. So I actually set out to answer that question for myself in the form of a YouTube series that I did back. This was, I think, November of this past year is when I started recording the series. And what I wanted to figure out is, can I sell and not make, obviously, in profit, but sell in revenue? Can I sell $60,000 in 60 days on Amazon from scratch? Not starting with my existing connections, not starting with my background, basically calling brands and distributors, acting like a brand new person, and can I hit that 60K threshold in 60 days? And what I found is that I didn't quite hit the 60K. I think I hit 32K in 60 days, but I made it a point to make my daily, like I only worked on this goal for, I think it was like 60 to 90 minutes a day, right? The whole premise of this series was I'm going to call 3 new brands per day. That's it. Only 3. Now I'm going to follow up with the ones that I called previously, so those don't count towards my 3, but it's just 3 new brands per day, every day for 60 days straight, which took me, like I said, anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half per day. And what I found is that if I did that every day for 60 days, I sold about $32,000 in revenue. And I made, I think it was like I'd have to look at the numbers, but I made like 3 or 4K in profit, right, over the course of those 60 days. So again, we're not talking rich money by any means, but like how many people out there would love to start up a new business from scratch that they know nothing about, and within 60 days they're making an extra, say, 2 grand a month in profit. Like for most people, that would be pretty big, right? For some people, that would be life changing. So that's what I tell people. I'm like, just find the lowest input that you can sustainably achieve each day, but you've got to hit it every day and then give it 60 days at least. We have a guy in one of our communities, his name's Matt Jensen. He did the same thing. He basically copied my premise, which I told him to do. He joined the community, and every day, he's on like day 66 or 67 now. Every day for the last 66 or 67 days, he has pretty much submitted like a progress report of his efforts for the day, right? Today I contacted these suppliers and I did these follow-ups and I did XYZ, and he hasn't missed a day. And it only took him, I think, a month-ish, 3 to 4 weeks for him to really start making his first profitable sales on Amazon. So again, results are going to vary by person, but the general time frame, if you're being consistent every single day, I'd say 60 days, you'll start making some money. And then what I tell people is 2 years, and nobody wants to hear this, but like 2 years is really the minimum threshold that it takes to be like good at this business, where you're making good money and you're building your connections and you're compounding your capital. So again, nobody's going to come out and say, it takes 2 years, but like it does. So that's what it is.
2 years to where it's really solid. But what I think is fascinating is most businesses aren't profitable in the first year. So to be profitable in 2 months, I mean, it may not be huge, but the point is you're in the black in two
Right.
months. That's good.
Yep.
That's good. And then you're just feeding that machine, and now 22 more months are needed to where it's solidified. But that's a pretty encouraging start right there, to know that you could be there in 2 months. And you said 60 to 90 minutes a day. I'm like, well, then you could potentially amplify that, I would think, if
You
you wanted
definitely
to.
could. Yeah. My goal, I just wanted to show people like this is the lowest effort required to see I guess not the most results for the lowest effort, I guess is how I should phrase it.
Definitely send me the link so I can put that in the notes, because I
Yeah,
think
we'll do.
that'd be very fascinating to see. Couple more questions here. If you could sit down, and you're still kind of early, right? I mean, you just started this 8 years ago, but a lot has clearly happened in 8 years. Going back to that kid who said, I just want to, extract video and make a little money on the side to
Yeah.
do whatever. What do you tell that person today? Because today we live in a world where there's a lot of Gen Z people, like, that can't afford houses. It's a
Right.
very common subject right now. In my household, it's a common subject. The whole Gen Z world right now is like, can't afford a house. Hello, American dream. What's going on? There's a lot of people in that younger age group, high school, early college, just out of college, that are like, how's this like gonna get going? Like, what do you tell someone in that young bracket, not so long ago? What would you tell them today as advice, looking at today's environment?
I'd say pick one thing and get really, really good at it. I'm talking like world class. And I mean, I think ideally that thing would be sales, right? If you are a top 1% salesperson, doesn't matter, good economy, bad economy, AI, no AI, robots taking over the world, doesn't matter. You're always going to have a job and you're always going to be able to make money. But again, if a lot of people are not salespeople, they don't want to be salespeople, they're not natural salespeople. So my advice to them would just be find one skill, become very, very good at it. To really to the almost to the detriment of everything else. Just laser focus on one thing and become world class.
Love it. So then what's next? Because you're still getting going. So where do you see this going over the next few years?
Yeah, good question. So Really, I mean, where we are with Brand Rocket and the Amazon business itself, I'm pretty happy with where that business is. I'm not dumping a ton of additional time and resources into that business only because there is platform risk that comes with selling on Amazon, right? Again, this is something that a lot of people in this space aren't going to say, but I just don't want to have, like I said earlier, all of my net worth or a ton of my liquid assets tied up in my Amazon inventory to then something catastrophic happen where I get shut down or something like that. So really what's next for me is keeping my Amazon business going where it is, slowly growing, and then from there diversifying into other asset classes, like something I'm doing this week, and you're in the real estate space so you can appreciate it. I'm lending on my first I'm essentially being a private money lender on my first first real estate deal. So that's a way that I plan to diversify and bring in some passive income through lending money. I've invested in a couple of commercial syndications of friends that I know who run these funds, who I trust, and just looking to diversify and not have all my eggs in the Amazon basket.
Love it. Love it. I did have one more quick question come up that just hit me that I know that if I don't ask it, someone will be like, you didn't ask about this.
Yeah,
What about Walmart?
good question. What about it? Anything specific?
Well, just, they've been kind of, in a way, been copying where what Amazon's been doing. Should people look at that as an option as well?
Yeah, so I know a lot of Amazon sellers that I know are diversifying into Walmart. And I don't sell on Walmart myself. I do have a seller account on Walmart. I just haven't used it. It's my understanding from the people in my network that Walmart is a much more pro seller platform than Amazon, meaning they are doing everything they can to attract new sellers, cater to them, pay attention to them, help them navigate the platform. Whereas Amazon, they're so big, they don't really care about their sellers, if we're being completely honest. So again, from what I understand, people are doing very well on Walmart. It's a newer platform, so there's not as many data tools out there to quickly and easily determine what sells or how well something sells. So, but the I guess the software ecosystem is growing very rapidly. So I think if you have interest in Walmart, I would get on there sooner than later, establish yourself there, and the platform is only going to continue growing. So I'm bullish on Walmart, and I know a lot of people who are as well.
Wow. I did not know that. That is very fascinating. So, do you do Amazon? Do you do Walmart? Sounds like there's some decision making to go on there.
Yeah,
So, but
pros
the
and cons to
principles are
both.
the same, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, Walmart is going to be, they're going to want to make sure you're selling authentic products, so you're going to need to have a good supply chain documentation there as well. They are a little more lenient as far as like what you can sell. So on Amazon, sometimes it's called being gated. So on Amazon, you're gated in certain brands and certain products, meaning you're not allowed to sell them. Whereas Walmart's a little more open to you selling just about anything with the proper documentation. So again, pros and cons to both platforms. A lot more volume happening on Amazon versus Walmart, but at the same time, a lot less competition on Walmart than on Amazon. So it's kind of like pick your poison.
There you go. Love it. Well, Corey, thank you for coming on today. It was very fascinating, very informative. A space that we all are loosely familiar with, but unless you're actually doing it, we don't really necessarily know a ton about it. So I appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge or wisdom on that. And giving everyone a side hustle they can start immediately on
Yeah,
the side
no,
for spare time if you still have that old VCR lying around. But yeah, but anyhow, thank you again for coming on the show, and for everybody here, there'll be links. And he talked about that series about 30 grand in 60 days. Well, he'll get me that link. We'll put it on there. If you want to connect with him, we'll have a link to his book. All that will be below. So Corey, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. Can you leave us with a final word?
yeah, final word. I mean, like I said earlier, I think the advice that I wish I would have gotten when I started, and even advice that I continue to give myself today, is just pick one thing, become world class at it, be super consistent, find out the things that you need to do that move the needle, and just do them every day, no matter how boring or monotonous it gets, because that's really what it takes.
Love it. Love it. Corey, thank you again. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Frank.